Testing? There we go. Like I said, if you're a Republican and a roadblock gets in your way, you figure out how to get through it. So that's probably a good place to start tonight Anyway, thank you all for coming. I can't tell you how encouraging it is to look out across a room like this and see this many people who care about their state and care about their country. Folks, that's really what it's all about. If we're going to turn this thing around, it's going to take our participation. It's going to take each one of us being actively involved. It's really great to see this many people here this evening. I thought I'd start with just a little bit of background on where I come from, what I'm all about as a person, and what our family has been through over the past years. Talk a little bit about how we got into politics in the first place, a little bit about the last 12 years, and then mostly spend most of the time on what we might do as governor to help turn this state around with your help and with your participation. So first on background, I'd like to start way, way back in my history. When my family moved from Mukwonago, Wisconsin over to East Troy, Wisconsin, I was in 4th grade, and I sat down in a Sunday school class, and across the table from me was this very beautiful young lady. I can still tell you what she was wearing to her 6th grade as we did things together in our Sunday school. I can tell you what she wore to confirmation class. We dated all through high school except for the year she gave me off for what she says is shaky behavior, which we never talk about in public. My wonderful wife, Sue, is here with me tonight. I'm also looking around the crowd here, and I see my son, Matt, who has had the pleasure of taking over our 6 different businesses, all in the real estate industry, is here with his new bride. Matt, you want to stand up? Go ahead, Amy. You too. I usually start with family because family means a lot. Sue and I have been married now for 36 years. We have 3 children, all grown and married, and 3 beautiful grandchildren. And when I think about putting aside our successful businesses in the private sector and offering our service in public life once again for the second time in our lives, it takes a lot of commitment, it takes a lot of decision making to do that, but at the end of the day, it's really about serving so that our children and our grandchildren can have a future in this state and in this country. I started off as a math teacher, graduated from UW-Whitewater. I see a lot of young folks out here. I can't encourage you enough to stay with it and complete your degree. It's something that you will have with you all of your life, and it's something that you will be mad at yourselves, I suspect, at some point in your future if you don't. So I start tonight by promoting education and encouraging each one of you to stay in school and complete that degree. It will be with you for the rest of your life, and even when you're old like me, you're going to look back on it and say, I'm glad I got that thing done. I'm glad I've got it under my belt. So I started as a math teacher out of UW-Whitewater. While I was teaching, I completed my master's degree out of River Falls and then did postgraduate work back at Madison. 4 years into teaching math, we had 2 young children. We were really struggling to pay our bills, and we took a chance on what I now look back on and understand was really the American dream. And again, we've got a lot of young folks here in the audience. That regular paycheck that I was getting as a teacher, looking at the fact that we were not going to get a regular paycheck and starting a business in the basement of our home was a very, very difficult decision. And to be honest with you, we struggled a lot to make it work. It's tough, folks, if you start your own business to fight your way through it, but it's worth it. And to the young people, if I can encourage you to take a shot at it, as long as it's morally and ethically okay with what you're trying, go ahead and try it. And if you fail and you get knocked down, you pick yourselves up again. You can pout for a little while, but not many people are going to listen to you anyway. Pick yourselves up and try again and keep doing it over and over again until you make it work. I won't go through all the failures we had in our business, but we had those along the way. We were into real estate at that point in time, which we had started in the basement of our home. We sold real estate for a few years, eventually opened an office in Milton, Wisconsin, and then we started building homes. And we got a rough lesson in business. The first year we built homes, we built 9 homes, and we spent $20,000 more building those homes than what we took in. And this is what I'm saying, folks, when you get knocked down along the way, it's all right to pout for a little bit, but don't pout for very long because nobody's listening to you. You pick yourself up and you get going and you figure it out. That was the middle 80s. And I know this will be hard to believe for the young folks that are in this room, but in the middle 80s, we really weren't using computers in the home building industry. We were really trying to track our costs literally on a sheet of paper, and even the spreadsheets that you all are accustomed to today were just not the common things that were being used back then. So we brought in technology. And again, I mention this and I focus on this because it's so important as we move forward. We brought technology into the home building industry. We went out and hired a computer programmer to write programs for our business that allowed us to track money in a different way than the other home builders were doing, gave us a tremendous advantage. And again, I'm putting in a plug for you all studying technology very carefully because it's changing so fast in our society that the things that we understand today are going to be altogether different a generation from now. And conceivably, even by the time you start jobs, there are going to be jobs in areas that we haven't even thought about today. So I look back on that time when we brought this technology into our industry. It gave us a great advantage over our competition. It was about 3 years later we had grown the company to a point where we were building 120 homes a year. We were providing 250 job opportunities. And I have to tell you, looking back on the time, we were really working hard at it, but we were truly living the American dream. You start with nothing, you build a business, you provide job opportunities for people. Our family was great. We had 3 kids by then. We were active in church. We were active in community. Folks, when I think about America and I look back on that time in our lives, we were literally living the American dream. But there was something missing that we weren't really talking about in our lives, and it's really Sue's fault that this happened and got us into politics. It was summertime. It was time for vacation. We had 3 kids. I wanted to do what most normal people in Wisconsin wanted to do. I wanted to take them up north fishing. And Sue said to me, she looked me in the eye, and she said, Mark, you know, the thing is, we've never really traveled with these kids out of the state of Wisconsin. Why don't we go to our nation's capital and take a look at what's out there and see more of this country? And folks, we went to Washington. We had a trip. We had a reservation there for 2 nights. We wound up staying for 6. How many have been to Washington, D.C.? You know, it's amazing. I asked this question before so many groups, and I bet you 90% of the people that I ask have been to our nation's capital, and that's great. What happened to us, folks, and remember, we're in the middle of living the American dream. Everything's going right in our lives at this point in time. We went to the Washington Memorial, and then we went to the Lincoln. And you're walking up those steps to the Lincoln Memorial, and it's almost like Abe Lincoln's looking down on you just like this, going, what's going on in America? And at that point in time, folks, we were facing significant deficits in the federal budget. We had a growing debt that we did not think it was fair that we passed on to future generations. We were losing jobs by the hundreds of thousands to Mexico, and Ross Perot was running these ads across TV that told us that America was dead and gone, and economically we could not recover. So that was the environment. Everything going right in our lives, and you get this patriotic feeling that there's more to America than just being successful at business and making money and making your family all work. There's actually more to it. We went out to Arlington National Cemetery, and if you start looking at those rows and rows of white headstones, folks, you really get an understanding that somebody paid dearly to give us the opportunity to live in the United States of America. And you also get an understanding that it is our responsibility to see to it that this nation and our state exists for future generations. And we came home from that trip. We had never done anything in politics in any way, shape, or form, but we came home with a very strong sense and an understanding that it was our responsibility personally, as well as each one of you sitting here in this room, folks. We have that same responsibility to the future of this nation. So we decided to try and run for office. Never occurred to us how tough it would be to run for Congress. Didn't know where the congressional district was. Didn't really know what it meant to run for office. And we ran the first time against a 22-year incumbent, Les Aspin. We had a very close race. We sold our business, used a lot of the resources from the business to run against him. I had a reasonable race against him. Right after we lost, he was appointed Secretary of Defense. So we ran in a second race, and it was very close. Everybody thought we're going to win. We spent most of the rest of our net worth at that point in time on something we believed in. And again, folks, if I can leave you with some thoughts tonight other than complete your education and try a business if you want to, and if you get knocked down, pick yourself up and go on. Don't be afraid to invest the resources the good Lord gives you back into something that means something to you and to your nation, to your country, and to your family. Don't be afraid to risk what you have doing something good for others, because I found that the good Lord will reward you many times over after you've taken those risks. So we came home, we ran that second race. Everybody said we're going to win the race. We lost the race. It was a recount. We had hanging chads here in Wisconsin before Florida knew what hanging chads were. But we lost. Went back into business. We started 2 businesses that didn't make it. And again, I'm back to reminding you that success is not a steady ladder up, but rather a fight that when you're knocked down, you pick yourself up and you get going again. And I will be honest with you, when those 2 businesses didn't make it, I pouted for a period of time. It took me from about May to November to figure out it's time to get going again. I can still remember the day. It was the Monday after Thanksgiving of that year that we went out and said, we're going back to real estate. We know how to do real estate. We know how to build houses. We know what to do. Let's go do it. And we started 2 more businesses, one in Kenosha and one in Janesville. And they started doing pretty well. Came election time. It's now spring of the following year. Nobody is running on the Republican ticket against this first-term Democrat in the district. And by the way, if you're a Democrat or Republican in here, that's not really what it's about. It's about being elected to office so that you can help improve the nation. Well, finally, at the end of the day, we wound up getting back into our 3rd race. We put our businesses aside and ran for office a 3rd time. We were elected. It was the closest race in the United States of America that year in Congress. And I went out to Washington, and we had a very specific theory in mind. And now this brings us up to where I'm going as governor, because this is the theory we want to apply to the state of Wisconsin. The theory went like this. If we could control government spending, we would be in a position to cut taxes, and if we cut taxes, you all would keep more of your own money, and if you kept more of your own money, there's only one of two things you would do. You would either spend it, and that would create jobs because somebody had to bring you those goods and services that you were buying, or you would save it, and if you save it, it becomes the capital that we needed for our businesses to grow and expand. Well, folks, for the only time in a generation, when I was in Congress 12 years ago, the federal budget was in fact balanced and into surplus, and this theory that we had, if we could get to balanced budget, we'd cut taxes. We passed the biggest tax cut in American history, and it worked. Jobs were created, and our economy was booming when I left Congress 12 years ago. How does that impact all of the young folks sitting in here tonight? Folks, you all are going to graduate from college here at some point in the not distant future, some of you sooner rather than later. If we can implement a plan of this nature, instead of looking at unemployment and trying to figure out what you're going to do that doesn't utilize the talents and the education that you're getting here, we want job opportunities for each and every one of them, and we want those job opportunities to challenge you. And we want opportunities for you to be promoted when you get those jobs. Folks, conceptually, this idea of balancing the budget so we can cut taxes, people keep more of their own money, will lead to job growth and economic development in the state of Wisconsin and in the United States of America. That plan actually works. Fast forward. Been back in the private sector. We were there for 4 years. When I left, the budget is balanced. We are in surplus. America is concerned about inflation because there are so many jobs that have been created that we're afraid we don't have the workforce to fill them. And if we don't have the workforce to fill the jobs, that means inflation. So one big concern was inflation. Another one was they had to figure out where to invest their money other than into federal government debt, and that gave private sector the capital it needed, and when the economy boomed even more. Folks, that was 12 years ago. I went back into the private sector, ran against Russ Feingold, lost that race, at a very close race, and went back into the private sector. We started real estate businesses and kind of back doing what we knew how to do, working hard in the real estate business, home building, etc. We have 5 or 6 different businesses in those areas in addition to the schools, which I can talk more about if somebody wants to know more about our education. But the bottom line is we've got the businesses going, things are going really well in our life, but I've been watching what's going on in our government, folks. Back in the private sector, when you watch this stuff, eventually you reach a point where you've just kind of had it right up to here with what's going on in government. And that same patriotic feeling that we felt the first time I went to Washington, D.C., folks, it's our responsibility personally to do everything in our power to make sure that this nation is preserved and that the next generation, the generation after that, will have the same kinds of opportunities that we've had. And that's caused us to set our businesses aside now for the second time in our lives. And after 12 years back in the private sector, and to be honest with you, a wonderful life in the private sector, we've decided to see if we can help this state and this country. So what are we going to do? The first thing is we understand that cutting taxes will let you keep more of your own money, and that will lead to job growth and economic development. That's the first priority. Second priority, and probably equally important, but it's second, education. And we're here on a college campus today. Education is so important, folks, to our future and to the future of this nation. Folks, we need to have the best educated kids in the world if America wishes to compete the next generation and the generation after that. So a strong focus needs to be on education. I'm a strong proponent of public schools where they work. Where we have good and great public schools in the state of Wisconsin, we should support them, we should promote them, and we should try and replicate them. But where our public schools are failing our students, we should not look the other way. We should bring in choice and charter schools for competition with the public sector. In the city of Milwaukee, where the school system is clearly failing in terms of results, we should have choice and charter schools without limitations. We started our first choice school in the city of Milwaukee 7 years ago. We had 47 students. Today in that school system, it's a 501c3. Today in that school system, we have 3 schools in Milwaukee and 1 in Phoenix, Arizona, nearly 1,000 kids in the school system. And when we measure our kids for academic growth, our kids are growing 5% on average faster than a child across the United States of America. So we are in the inner city of Milwaukee. We have the highest risk kids in the state of Wisconsin, and academically they are outperforming the national averages on their standardized test scores. And one more thing, and for the folks here that are paying property taxes, one more important item, we're getting that education done that is succeeding at about 50 cents on the dollar compared to the public schools. So at a cost of approximately 1/2 of what's being spent in the public schools, the education is actually succeeding in the inner city of Milwaukee. Folks, that's something we need to take a good close look at because a lot of property taxes are generated by our school costs, And I'm hearing every place I'm going about concern of public education having enough dollars ready. And again, if you'd like to ask questions on that, I can spend a lot of time on that. But the bottom line is, at the end of the day, we need to be concerned about having the best educated kids in the world if we wish to be competitive for jobs. Third, in terms of creating this situation where jobs will come here, folks, the bottom line is if we can't get to a point where the government gets out of the way so our businesses can grow and expand, we have rules, we have regulation, we have red tape. A lot of it relates to the DNR. We have got to get government out of the way so that our businesses in this state want to grow and expand, because when they do, that means job opportunities for all the young folks sitting out there. Now, they say picture worth 1,000 words, so I'm going to give you one picture here tonight. I'm going to do something that most people in politics don't usually do. I'm going to actually show you a tax plan as to how you can actually get taxes down in the state of Wisconsin. What I'm showing in this plan is the approximate amount of money that we are currently spending, and what we're currently taking in. Many of you have heard that there is a shortfall in the state of Wisconsin budget, and in fact there is. They've filled that shortfall with budget gimmicks, the things you can't stand about government, budget gimmicks and the stimulus money. And it's approximately a $2 billion shortfall, maybe a little bit over $2 billion. Our plan is this. We know we're spending $31 billion a year. We are going to cap the growth rate of spending at 1% under the rate of inflation. In real dollar terms, we are going to shrink the size and scope of our government by at least 1% annually. And I always ask people, folks, how many of you think that the government can find $1 of saving for every $100 that they're spending? Because in reality, that's what I'm saying. Let me ask that question again, because that is the crux of our plan. Can the government find $1 in savings for every $100 that they're spending? Because that is the crux of this plan. Can we do better than that? We probably can. In our businesses, when the downturn hit in home building, it was more like $15 out of every 100, and we got through it. So can government do better than $1 out of 100? I think they can, but I'm willing to put my name on this, and we won't do worse than this. We may do better. So what happens? We have revenue down here at $29 billion per year. Revenues to the state grow for two reasons. They grow because of real growth in the economy, and that's not hard to understand. If a business locates here in Waukesha, they have employees, that's real growth in the economy, and those employees pay taxes, and that increases the revenue to the state. So revenues grow because of real growth in the economy, and they also grow because of inflation. And again, that's not hard to understand. If you get a pay raise next year, you're going to take home more money. When you take home more money, of course, you pay more in taxes. So we have revenues growing to the state because of inflation and real growth in the economy. If we assume real growth at 2% and inflation at 3%, what happens is this line climbs a lot faster than the spending line, and in fact they cross and we get into a surplus area. Folks, this is where the tax cuts come in. And if I can show you just the second chart, this chart starts at where the budget is actually balanced. And what you can see is that this line keeps getting wider and wider and wider. In fact, over an annual basis, you have a 3% spread. And if you do this over an 8-year period of time, you actually create a 24% spread. Folks, that's the money we need to cut taxes in the state of Wisconsin. We can actually get this done. Now, when I say this, a lot of people look and say, well, that's good to talk about. I dug out of the archives here from back when I was in Congress. Believe it or not, this chart was written in 1992. And this little chart shows the growth rate of, I'm going to set it down here for just a second, shows the spending growth rate, which was 8% when I was looking at this back in the early 90s of the federal government. Revenues were only going up at 6%. So if revenues go up by 6 and spending is going up by 8, of course you're getting a wider gap and bigger deficits, which was exactly what was going on. We understood that if we could take this line down and cap it at 1% under the growth rate of inflation, we would have a 2% growth rate in spending. The lines would in fact cross, and when the lines cross, we would be in surplus. Folks, this is exactly what happened in Washington, D.C. If you check the history books and you check the spending levels and you check these lines, does that chart look familiar to this chart? It should. Folks, the plan is virtually the same. We've done it before, it worked, and we can do it again. So when I look at being governor here in the state of Wisconsin, I bring to the table, and what I hope to draw from in resources is an understanding of private sector business, how much the government is in our way and how we can get government out of the way. But I also bring with me a pretty solid idea on how we're going to get taxes under control. And understand when I talk about cutting taxes, what I really see is putting us in a competitive advantage situation in terms of attracting jobs to the state, because if our taxes go down, we will in fact be in a position to better attract jobs to our state and keep them here. All right, I'm going to throw it open to questions.